Let me ask you a question. Did you roll for Chevreuse? She is a very unique character, and her existence opens up a completely new type of team comp. Overload teams. Now, granted, Overload has been in the game since the beginning, however, it's always been generally looked down upon compared to the other reactions. I mean, it knocks enemies back, its damage is fairly low, and both elements have far more favorable reactions that it just sort of fell to the wayside and never really became its own team comp. But now we have a character that really incentivizes the reaction and may even make it viable. But that's not what this video is about. Not entirely, at least. What I actually want to talk about is how this new type of team comp can benefit Dehya, my favorite character. As some of you watching may know, Dehya was one of my early videos on this channel. She was extremely disliked by a large portion of the Genshin community. I've always taken the stance that she was better than people had thought, and I honestly believe that this team can prove that. Anyway, let's get to it. Now, straight up, this team does not function without Chevreuse, so let's get started with her, as she's going to be the crux of this team. Firstly, her normal attack doesn't really have any meaning in her kit for the most part. Though she's technically a polearm user, she's actually more of a gun user given her skill. She can tap the skill to fire a quick shot in front of her, dealing pyro damage, or she can hold the skill to aim her gun and lock onto enemies for additional damage. If an overload has occurred before this, she will instead fire an empowered shot, dealing even more damage. This shot actually does a very sizable amount of damage, even when you're strictly building her as a healing support. That being said, she's also a healer. After shooting her gun, she also heals the active character for an amount based on her maximum health. This ability does a ton of things, and honestly, all of it is pretty good. But wait, it gets better. But before we get to that, I'll briefly mention her burst. She fires a big shot that deals AoE pyro damage and leaves behind a bunch of additional grenades that deal minor damage as they go off. Moving into the good stuff, we have her first passive. As long as the party has at least one pyro and one electro character and no other elements present, whenever you perform an overload, the enemies afflicted will have their electro and pyro resistances reduced by 40% respectively. That's a Viridescent Venerer resistance shred. That's a lot of damage increase potential, and on top of that, it's actually easier to maintain than VV, since you can just be dealing pyro and electro damages passively pretty easily. I can't stress enough how good this kind of effect is, and it definitely shouldn't be slept on. This right here is what makes Chevreuse viable. Now her second passive, though less exciting, is still quite good. Nearby party members gain an attack percentage bonus based on Chevreuse's max health at a maximum of 40,000 health, or in other words, 40% attack. This can be fairly sizable and adds on to the buffs that we already have, like Bennett, quite nicely. Altogether, this kit is extremely tight and cohesive, right to the point, but some may be put off by the team building restrictions. It can still be very good, very similar to the case of Nilou Bloom team. Next, I wanted to touch on her constellations, as some of them really support her overall playstyle, though most of them assist her in dealing damage. C1. When a character causes overload, other than Chevreuse, while her first passive is active, they restore some energy. Not bad. C2. When using her hold skill, additional explosions will activate, dealing bonus damage. C4. After using her burst, her next skill use won't trigger a cooldown. It's really nice, actually. And finally, C6. Her skill gives additional healing, and when a character is healed by her skill, they will gain bonus electro and pyro damage up to a maximum of 60%. All in all, these are pretty solid, and with a couple standouts, namely her C1 and 6. Though her constellations that increase her damage are actually okay too, since her personal damage is notably higher than I would have expected. For her build, I opted for the new healing set, focusing on HP while trying to pick up a few extra crit stats where possible. This set can be replaced with pretty much anything, as long as you can maintain that nice 40% max HP on her. For weapon, I went for Rightful Reward, as it gives HP bonus plus a bit of energy regeneration. Alternatives can include Black Tassel for the bonus health, or Staff of Homa if you really like your gun hitting with a bang. Altogether, we have a very cohesive character on our hands, and with her completely broken down, we can talk about Dehya and how she fits into all this. Obviously, she is a pyro unit, but I argue that the natural form of this team synergizes so perfectly with what Dehya wants to do. Before I go into detail on the team itself and how it plays, I just wanted to quickly touch on Dehya's talents and build. I've already done a video on Dehya, but there's been a few upgrades since then, but I wanted to quickly go over it, and then we could get to the good stuff. First, we have her normal attack, which doesn't really offer anything special, but since our team will be using a C6 Bennett, it can deal some damage in a pinch, but it isn't going to be our focus. Next up is her skill, which leaves an area of effect that can do coordinated pyro attacks every few seconds. These attacks scale with her attack stat as well as her maximum health, and shares damage taken between Dehya and your other teammates within the area. Damage mitigation is an often slept on bonus for this skill, so don't look down on it. It can actually save you in a pinch. Next up is her burst, which unleashes a flurry of punches that deal health and attack scaling pyro damage. For our team, this will be our primary damage dealer, as long as we can maintain good uptime on it, naturally. For passives, we have a buff to Dehya's damage mitigation, giving her even more tankiness and ability to absorb damage for your team. It also gives your whole team resistance to interruption, which again is a very useful tool to have and is often overlooked. Her final passive gives her a burst of healing after going below 40% max health. In short, even more tankiness. Since we're working with a 5-star, constellations are usually a bit out of reach for most players due to RNG and all that. But I will mention her C1, as I will be exploiting it for this build. In short, it gives her health scaling to all the parts of her kit that didn't already have it. This makes it so you can really lean on her HP as her primary stat. Now for artifacts. I have upgraded her from the last time I showed her off to a Varakasha's Glow set, to get even more damage as well as a little bit of extra health. Other sets you can consider are of course Crimson Witch, Emblem of Severed Fate, or a mix of Crimson Witch and any attack percent set. For weapon, I'm of course going to be using her signature weapon, the Bacon of the Red Sea. Beacon of the Reed Sea. I'll get that right one of these days. Naturally, we're going to use this weapon, right? I mean, I have it, I might as well use it. However, for those who didn't treat their Dehya with respect, you can also use weapons like Serpent Spine from the Battle Pass, the recent released HP Claymore, the Portable Power Saw, and failing that, you can use something like the Bell in a pinch for those who have her C1, or any decent attack stat Claymore for those who don't. Overall, here are the stats that we're going to be working with. So what is this team going to look like, and what are we going to be doing? Our basic rule is that we can only have Pyro and Electro characters and at least one of each. Next we need our Electro character to be off-field, since our primary on-field damage dealer is going to be Pyro. So without further ado, this is what I came up with. This team's going to look very similar to those who saw that first Dehya video. Raiden Shogun will be our primary Electro damage dealer due to her incredible off-field Electro application, as well as battery potential for the whole team. On top of that, she can also act as a great burst of damage if we ever have downtime due to cooldowns misaligning or energy being lower than we expected. Alternatives can include Fischl, Yaimiko, or Cookie Shinobu, as they all can do this sort of Electro off-field thing fairly well and generally produce an okay amount of energy. Ultimately, any character that can really lay down the Electro damage well off-field is usable here. Next, of course, is going to be Bennett, the Pyro Archon, and one of the strongest buffs that we could possibly have access to, plus a nice bit of extra healing never hurt anyone. I've of course built him with a decently high base attack weapon and a ton of energy recharge. And with that, you can really start dishing out the pain. For this slot, if you have to replace it, I'd consider characters like Toma or Kujo Sara. Worth noting, for the few of you out there that actually have Dehya's weapon and you want to try this, do not use Toma. Because if you use her weapon with Toma, it is a massive damage loss because having a shield is a problem. For the last slots, we of course have Chevreuse and Dehya, which I've already gone over in some depth. With that out of the way, let's quickly go over what the playstyle looks like. Here's what the rotation is going to look like. First, we need to get Raiden skill active for the obvious overload setup. We want to maintain this skill at all times. Next up is Bennett, which will use his burst and skill to get our first buff down, as well as the chain of overloads that we're going to be doing. Next up is Chevreuse, who will now have her skill empowered by the previous overload, giving us access to our second buff. Finally, we activate Dehya's skill to get her passives online and a little bit of extra damage started, followed by her burst, the almighty punch combo. After that, we simply go back to Shogun and start things again. With all that in mind, I took this team through the abyss from start to finish, managing good times on pretty much every floor. So let's get this ball rolling and see what they can do. Having a team for Dehya that feels this good is so nice. I feel truly vindicated right now after having to fight people constantly on Dehya's viability. Honestly, I've thought she was good since I got our hands on her, but with this team, I feel like she finally has a proper home. Though this isn't the last team I want to try with her, you can look forward to seeing her alongside Furina in a vape team, once I get Furina of course. If you want to see that, please leave a like and subscribe. I also stream right here on YouTube Monday to Friday at 10 AM to 2 PM Eastern Time, so if you want to see this stuff live, come check it out. It's a pretty chill experience. With all that said, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day. That's all from me. Cheers.